Welcome back to the YOUniverse podcast, where we discuss a range of complexities that surround our human experiences, but more importantly, personal growth. I'm your host, Shanley, and today's episode is an ode to my 30s. We're talking about the lessons between age 18 and 29 and all the perspective that we are carrying with us as we lean into those 30s years. So really, I want to focus on the vision of where I thought I should have been by this age versus the surprising reality and the blessings that came with that in disguise. So I want to focus on the element that we're taught so much from kindergarten through 12th grade onwards to college. But truly, no one ever teaches you about the trials that you face when you're growing into your own skin, away from that home that you've always known. There's no manual or study guide that gives you outcomes from a multiple choice list that you can answer from. And I think college is what I'm going to refer to as the start of my adult life. You've got a new environment, you've got new friends, a job maybe, extracurricular activities. Truly, it's all new and it's a blank canvas. So let's start with my perspective going into college. I thought, you go to college, you get a good degree, you get a good paying job with benefits when you're done with college, you save money and you're going to be financially free forever. You find and have love maybe multiple times if you're lucky. You get married by age 28 when you finish college, and then you'll be financially comfortable and debt-free by age 30. That was my plan. And clearly I had it figured out, right? Well, we both know that is not what ended up happening, and that wasn't the reality that unfolded for us. So let's talk about the perspective during college. Since high school was relatively easy for me, I went in thinking college classes would be too. That was false. I got into college, didn't realize that there were specialty programs that you had to have certain credits for to apply to after a certain point of being in college. So I went in as an exercise science major, didn't have the appropriate credits when it came to that time. So I was kind of forced to change my degree to public health, which I did really like. But again, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast or not yet, but my brain is more art and literature as opposed to math and science. So after the fifth time of taking biology and chemistry, I was just over it. Truth be told, at that time, there's also, depending on your degree, certain tiers for grades that you need to have to be able to move on to the next course. So for me in chemistry, I had to have a B or higher to move on beyond that course. I could not, for the life of me, get a dead set B. I was getting B minuses left and right. That wasn't enough. And I was on financial aid. So for me, I came to a crossroads where I had to choose because of my financial position. So I ended up changing my major again to education. And I will tell you, education is beautiful. We need amazing teachers in the educational system, but it was not for me. I struggled to wrap my head around, and it wasn't the money element so much as it was the monotony that came from that kind of job. And teachers would probably argue with me on that, but at least for the type of person that I am, I think I need more change on a frequent scale to feel alive, if that makes sense. So I kid you not, I did teaching. I changed my major to teaching for a day. After that day, I was like, I'm going to take a break. And, this semester will be the semester I have off. I believe it was a summer semester too. So most kids don't take summer classes anyways, but I always did because I was ready to just be done. So I took that time and evaluated what classes would transition to a new major easy and would be less and get me graduated sooner, if that makes sense. So I ended up landing on communications with a focus in public relations. That honestly really spoke to my soul in a lot of ways. I'm a writer by nature. So it was a good fit, and it just made sense. So to that point, high school and college are very different things, and I wasn't prepared for that mentally. Did it work out for me? Yes, but I think I wasted a lot of time and money not having a full understanding going into those years of college. Curriculum was unexpected. But since I did work throughout high school part-time, I also thought that working full-time on top of a full-time school schedule would be sufficient too. False. Not only did I have little social life, but it cost me hours of sleep. I could truly only go out after like a night of work, which meant I often slept in the campus library, class hallways, in between classes frequently. And there is something to say about the age where you can truly bounce back on minimal sleep. I also didn't understand the significance of sleep at the time. I was always going on no fuel and fine. But I also had crazy anxiety, and hindsight 2020, I recognize why. So, yes, working full-time alongside a full-time class schedule had proven to be more difficult than I anticipated. In addition to working full-time, establishing a routine outside of those immediate commitments was more challenging than I had even known. Throughout, high school, I did dance, I did student government, I also did, school at the actual high school, but I also did dual enrollment at the community college across campus so that I could have college credits as I left high school, as opposed to just taking AP classes. So I thought that's all you did. You just did your extracurriculars alongside your school and you were done. No, this adds that third element. So we're working, we're going to school, but we're also trying to figure out what works for us and what makes us feel good in an environment where we don't really have anybody else reassuring us on a daily basis that, like, maybe our parents might have. So that was a little difficult, especially because I didn't really know myself yet. I was just going through the motions and figuring out what this new world was to me. So while doing that, that obviously introduced exercise and nutrition, figuring out what that looks like alongside like my body type and the relevance that it had in like my daily routine and performance, community and friendships. Finding where you belong and being your authentic self is very difficult when you're in the middle of figuring out what that looks like. And I remember really utilizing the resources that we had on campus. I went to the nutritionist free, learned a lot as like a good starting point. I would say actually, that's when I learned the 80-20 rule, which if you're unfamiliar with that, eating pretty clean 80% of the time with a 20% grace to really indulge in things that you might enjoy. Then I also started, dipping my toes into the gym. I never had to go to the gym in high school. I was so active between dance, and I danced in two different environments. I danced for my high school, but I also danced at a studio. So overall, a lot of my free time was moving my body. When I made that transition to college, I wasn't doing anything that demanded physical activity on a daily basis like I once had. So it became important to me quickly to dive into, the educational side of a gym environment. And just to kind of show the evolution of perspective here too, I once had the impression that if I lifted weights, I would get really bulky and chunky. We all know. At this point, I hope you know that that is not true. If anything, it just defines your body a little bit more and leans you out because you're burning more fat when you are lifting weight. So, again, this is all the things that I had to figure out on my own that wasn't taught to me, one, by example through my parents and what they knew, but nor was it taught in the educational system. These are all things that are unexpected when you step into a new environment away from home. So let's talk about living quarters. Whether you're living on campus in the dorms or you have an apartment off campus, I think anytime you're living with someone else, one, you learn a lot about you and your habits, but you also learn about the variety in other people's habits. And to effectively communicate and come to a compromise with your living quarters, I think that is something that everyone needs to experience before they have a serious relationship with someone. I started off college having a random roommate, I might add. At the time, I didn't really feel like I was lucky because we had a lot of complications, to say the least. But later on, we actually grew closer when we weren't living together. There was an element of appreciation for what we ended up having as opposed to what we felt like it was in the moment, if that makes sense to you. But, we held up our end. We had a single room, one person on one side, the other on the opposing end, and there's no privacy, there's no downtime, there's no, peace the way that you would maybe define it. So I think that was a very big learning curve that I actually was anxious about going into college, but it taught me a lot about removing the emotion for something that could drastically impact your well-being on a daily basis. Fast forward a little bit, I move off campus and I have roommates with people that I actually went to high school with. So you go into that with a familiarity, but you also learn a different side to those people just because of, who they are when the door is closed to the world. So that was something I didn't expect, I would say, whether it be chores, definitions of cleanliness, elements of respect for each other's things, especially if you have most of the furniture in the household. Having those hard conversations translates so deeply in when you're beyond those college years. So I would say that is a big one for me that was pivotal. But also, we're talking about money a lot today and ownership of bills when you have a roommate. There's always one person that has everything in their name, and there's somebody else that is responsible for having punctual payments so that the other person isn't suffering the consequences. This is so stressful. Even if you have somebody that you're really close with, that you live with, it adds a lot of pressure to your dynamic. And it also highlights the importance of your ability to talk about money. If you're not exercising that muscle now with a roommate, you're not going to be able to do it later with a partner. So that was something that I didn't anticipate to learn, but also it transmit to a requirement with future relationships. So, I happened to be the person with everything in my name when my first roommate moved out and then next roommate moved in. And when things are in your name, you obviously assume more responsibility. If things aren't paid on time, it affects you. It affects your credit and your name. So I'm going to give a little element of advice because I wish I would have gotten it sooner than I did in the moment. Get a receipt book. If you have everything in your name and you're trying to track when money is delegated to you for each month's requirement of rent, utilities, you name it, write their name, write the amount that they give you, when they give it to you, and give them the copy of the receipt. So you have everything tracked. They're, one, able to build trust with you and knowing that you're using their money for what you're saying it's being used for. But two, it's a tracking tool for you as well. So when things are late, when things are on time. So if there is an opportunity to have or meet a difficult conversation, you're prepared and you have everything you need to back that up. So we've talked about bills. We've talked about education so far. We've talked about physical health and wellness. So let's talk about breakups and dating life. I didn't realize how stressful this would be. My position at the time, I went into college with my high school sweetheart who was older than me. So there was a weird overlap with where we were at in life. 2 years older doesn't sound like a lot, but at the age, I think I was 18, 2 years older than that. I'm still going to, in high school, senior year, I'm going to like my prom, I'm going to my homecoming, and he's already out of that. He's experiencing something totally different. He's going through this, transformative experience that college introduces, and I wasn't. So both sides here, there's that perspective that you want to live and have all of the youthful experiences that older partner might have already gone through. And that older partner doesn't want to rob you of that, but they also are beyond that. So you can see where the friction would add up. So for me going into this, I really did think that was going to be a forever commitment, despite all the things that came up along the way and the hesitations that presented themselves. So I didn't go into college having the mindset that there would be other opportunities for love. And when that relationship did come to an end, dating in college is so different than dating in high school, and I was not prepared. My relationship was so innocent and pure, and dating isn't always that. So there was a drastic change in pace, and learning people's expectations and navigating their intentions to find a balance between meeting people, but also where you're meeting people was very difficult. Dating apps are hard because there's always a physical expectation that comes with that. When I'll be honest with you, I'm more old school. I'm an old soul. And for me, intimacy comes from an intellectual side of the puzzle, but also like a deeper emotion. So to just have casual sex doesn't really do it for me. I would much rather have a connection with somebody and explore that. So because of that, I was not super sexually active in between relationships. And that was also kind of odd with the culture that you're immersed in. I think at that time in my life, it was like, fuck bitches, get money kind of mindset. And I did try. I'll be honest with you. I tried to be the type of girl that could just hook up and like let it go. But it just wasn't for me. I don't know. I felt dirty. I felt used. I mean, you are in some regards. I don't know. It just didn't work out for me. And that was a very unexpected element that nobody prepared me for going into college. So I think a good segue from relationships is most likely plans. You can plan, and plan again all you want, but things are never going to go exactly according to that plan. So you can either learn to pivot and embrace everything that pivot introduces to your life, or you can just sit and sulk in the misery of what didn't work out. This applies to everything, whether it be education, whether it be a job, a relationship, a friendship, family. It literally applies to everything. So be a little more adaptive and be prepared to adapt, because things are they don't always go to plan, especially when you're in that transformative journey or process. Alongside that, I also was very good at saving throughout college. Everything that I made from my full-time job would most likely go to savings after my bills. I was not a spender. I've never really been big on the materialistic things, at least at that time, because the goal was to be able to afford those things later. Save now, be well off later, be debt-free later. And saving is great. I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that. I do believe in having a savings for specific things, like an emergency fund, you name it. But it grows slow and it goes quick. And let me be the first to tell you that interest is a bitch. So, if I can give any perspective on that, try to educate yourself throughout that journey, because it's a tough one to face when you do finally leave that environment. Believe it or not, college is more controlled than when you are an adult, and you assume more financial responsibility. Now, mind you, everybody's experience is different. I didn't have a whole lot of help from my parents in this time in my life. I had some. I think it was my phone. I obviously didn't have a car payment. And occasionally my parents would throw me money here and there for other things. Some kids don't even have that luxury. So don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining by any means. But if there's one thing that I wish somebody would have told me is to learn how to make your money work for you. And if you have the extra money during those younger years, make it 10x if you can. And we'll talk about how to do that later. Okay, so we've talked about a lot here, but I think the last point of the perspective that I gained during college is I went into it thinking love was enough to sustain a long-term relationship. And as long as the love was there, you can get through anything. That was my perspective during college. So let's talk about the perspective that I had leaving college. And you've maybe heard little glimpses of it in the previous portion of this, but let's recap, if you will. And I can't drive this enough, but a piece of paper with the words degree on it doesn't actually make a difference in who you are as a person. It doesn't solve your financial problems, and nor does it really actually make you more important than a person that doesn't have one at all. Please remember that. In addition to that, you actually have less time after college than you did during. So please do yourself the favor and find ways to have more fun while your youth is at its peak. That is one regret that I had. I was so serious, so ready to grow up that I didn't allow myself to have more fun, and I didn't make time for more fun. I didn't loosen up, and that is my regret. My only regret from college. Okay, so we're back to money now. The one thing that I did carry out of college that I really want, if nothing else sticks with you throughout this podcast, please let this stay with you. Saving, again, it's not enough. You need to have your money working for you so you can have that financial freedom. It's truly the key to having financial freedom. So take the time to educate yourself, be financially literate, and ensure that you have multiple baskets for the way that you choose to have your money work for you. That can be retirement plans. It can be stocks, crypto, you name it. Be creative and have a little something in everything, because it doesn't hurt to have options. If you put it all into one avenue, I promise you're going to regret it. And I'd rather you learn now than later. You are all you have from the day you take your first breath in this world. Prioritize that above all and do your best to nourish it, whether it be mind, body, soul, and everything that you can do to ensure that you are better than you were the day before. Things like nutrition, hydration, sleep, recovery, exercise, meditation. The list is never ending, but please make yourself the priority above anything else. Only when there is a solid alignment with this can you truly welcome someone else into your life. And you have to remember that you each are individual people walking parallel timelines. Although joined together, they never morph into one. You lose yourself when you morph into one. So it's imperative that you stay parallel and be aligned with where you're moving in the direction that you're moving. And it's okay if that direction shifts gears, and it's okay to part ways, but you'll always be moving parallel. This is something that I say to everybody that I meet, especially those that might be in a dark state of mind when we're having the conversation, but it really applies to anything. So you truly only fail when you give up. Everything else along the way is a redirection, and it's a learning lesson. Remember that. You only fail when you give up. That means you could embark on a high-risk business investment and lose everything. Okay, well, if you choose to accept that, fall into this pit, go homeless, have no income, you're accepting the defeat and you're letting it define your life. Or you could see that as an opportunity to see what you did wrong, ensure that those things are not repeated the next time around, and craft a plan that is a little more efficient than the first time. And you keep repeating that cycle until it gets you somewhere. If one foot is constantly moving in front of the other, we don't ever fail and the journey doesn't stop. So on your hardest days, I want you to truly remember that. So another one that I really want to talk about is traditions, okay? So I was in a relationship that had been very fixated on keeping things the same. I really want to drive this home. Traditions are what you make them. And it doesn't have to be the exact same experience over and over again. Tradition can be seeking change and new experiences. When you find somebody that embraces that with you, at least if this is important to you, I would say, you can have something like, okay, each year for Christmas, we go to a different mountain to celebrate and to be with family. Or we might try a different pie from a different state every year. Those can be traditions too. It doesn't have to be the same. Let's sit down. Let's have the same turkey and the same gravy on Thanksgiving, okay? I would encourage to expand your definition of traditions and really immerse yourself in a diverse perspective so that you can have a more colorful palate, okay? We want to taste different flavors. We want to have different experiences because at the end of the day, living life on repeat is boring enough as it is. Like, we do that with our work. We do that with our routines. So why not make something special, extra special, by livening up the tradition? Okay? That comes from a personal place. You can either take that in or let it go. But I think that is important because being confined is everywhere we look. So let yourself be free. Okay? So that is a really good point, transitioning point, I would say. Travel often. And it's even better if you can move when you travel. Travel reminds you that your immediate reality is only a small fraction of a dual reality world. There are so many cultures. There are so many religious practices and communities that are moving at different paces, and you can truly only stay humble when you recognize that at the end of the day, not everything is about you. And this world will always move regardless of what you believe and choose to see. That's a big one. And again, love is not enough to sustain a lifelong commitment. There's so much more to life and sharing that with somebody than just love. You can love someone and not like them very much. You can love someone deeply and they cause more stress and anxiety in your life than is necessary. And these aren't the examples that I think are really selling my point here. I think once upon a time, I thought if you love somebody enough, you can find some way to come to an agreement. And that's not always true. Some things are more important to people than just being able to sacrifice. I think a good example of that, children. If you have somebody in your life that you see a long-term future with, and it's important to them that they have children, and it's not important to you, your love for one another is not going to be enough to nourish that desire within that person. Maybe for some it would be, but for many it's not. And that person, you're asking that person to walk around with a void of something that they could potentially have with someone else. So love is not enough. You have to have those hard conversations, and there has to be a sense of selflessness that comes from those conversations. If you truly love somebody, to give them what would truly make them happy. And this is a really great point. You are not behind if you don't have an education, aren't married by a certain amount of time of being with one another. And you're not a misfit if you don't want children, okay? These are all things that society makes it seem like by X time in X amount of years, you have to be deemed successful. You are the author of your own story, okay? You and only you are the only person in that story that truly knows what's a best fit, okay? So please don't let it convince you otherwise. So we've talked about my perspective going into college. We've talked about the perspective during and leaving college. Now, fast forward, we're in our 30s. And I really want to talk about the perspective that I've had going into that chapter. And it looks like many things to different people. But I really want to focus on how your perspective can really alter. Most look at age, specifically their 30s, as a unit that measures your youth or an achievement. And I respectfully disagree. Yes, youth in its purest forms is behind you. And I truly agree with that, but age is a mindset. And I'll be real with you. I know several friends that have had children that don't even make it to their double digits. They never had an 18th birthday or even had the opportunity to come home from war to meet their fiance at the altar. To me, making it to my 30s is a privilege, and more importantly, it's a blessing. Was my path linear getting here? Far from it. You guys have seen that. Am I a failure for not being married or having kids like many that are surrounding me? Absolutely not. Am I a deadbeat because I'm not bringing in an income that I anticipated I would have by this age? Absolutely not. Or am I a loser if I didn't have a degree? I think you know the answer is no. Society, especially now with all the accessibility social media has blessed and cursed us with, will have you constantly feeling like you're behind, but more above all, losing sight of what actually matters the most. To be 30 means that I am fortunate to have had my mental and physical health intact for 30 years. It means that I have made it through all the hard days that seemed near impossible and unbearable, that I'm resilient. It means that I have found community every time I have opened myself up to it in a new and foreign environment. It means to have a roof over your head, to have food and water, to eat, love, to give, a chance to choose what you want to be in this world. Honestly, combined, they're all elements of peace that many around the world have never even come close to knowing. It means the right love doesn't need to be validated by a material item or a sheet of paper stamped by the state. It means that not bearing children extends the time that I have to truly and intimately expand on a relationship with myself and my partner, so that we have a solid foundation in place when or if something so precious does come into our lives. And to that point, even if it doesn't, that's okay. It's not a need, nor does it make you any less of a woman not to have children. It means that I am granted the gift of another day to experience, to make memories, and hold the ones that I love most in this world. I get to live, and that alone feels like a treasure. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the point I'm making here is that we get so caught up in lost time, the should-haves, the would-haves, the could-haves, and the pressures of other people's expectations and the society's normal, that we force ourselves to believe that we are abnormal or behind when we're really just outside those parameters. So I really want this to drive home. I'm going to say this once, and I want you to repeat it to yourself and truly say it with your chest so that you can embody it. Being an outlier is your advantage. Again, being an outlier is your advantage. It means that you challenge narratives. It means that you can channel a bird's eye view. It means that you are totally open to the endless perspectives and opportunities that coexist in this world. It means that you are secure with yourself. And more importantly, it means that you thrive outside the box as opposed to being within it. Nothing else holds a candle to your life when you are choosing for yourself. So, my friends, with all of that, here's to the blessings that have led me to reaching 30 and all the beautiful things that have yet to come. May I continue to be granted the gift of another day, and may the work that I've done so far speak for me. So with that, everyone, thank you for listening. if you've enjoyed this episode, please, please, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone that you feel may benefit from it. Your feedback really does encourage growth, and it allows for this content to reach a broader audience for people that may benefit from the same message. So if you're curious what platforms we're on, or I'm on, I should say, be sure to follow me on Spotify. We're also on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. All platforms will indicate any updates or additional content surrounding the YOUniverse podcast. So until next time, I'm your host, Shanley. This is the YOUniverse podcast. Stay true, stay brave, and keep moving forward. I'll see you all next week, now every Wednesday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Ta-ta for now.